A lot of people have compared 2020 to 1968, probably the last year in American history as tumultuous as this one, and probably the last year with this kind of mass protest on the scale that we've seen over the last 6 weeks. And it was in 1968 that the National Congress of American Indians first launched a campaign to end negative and harmful stereotypes perpetuated by media and popular culture, particularly the continued use of racist and derogatory Indian sports mascots, logos, and symbols. And so it's fitting, 52 years later, amid what the New York Times has said may be the largest movement in U.S. history, that one of the most offensive names in professional sports is finally gone, retired for good. The Washington NFL team's owner and head coach say they are working to develop a new team name and logo, even though as recently as 2013, owner Dan Snyder famously said, and I quote, "We'll never change the name. It's that simple. Never. You can use caps." It's kind of amazing the effect social movements can have on institutions and society. It's also telling when big-time corporate sponsors demand necessary change. Earlier this month, Adweek reported that close to 90 investors and shareholders sent letters to Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi asking them to end their relationship with the Washington franchise. After that report, FedEx told the team to change their name or they would pull their stadium signage, a move that could cost the team millions. And Nike pulled all the team's gear from its website. And just like that, the team has suddenly ditched its pejorative name. To talk more about this decision, I'm joined by former NFL player Donté Stallworth, who played for the Washington franchise in 2011. And I thought I'd start on that, Donté. Obviously, this is something that indigenous activists have worked on for literally decades, fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, and have won a much-deserved victory today. But I always wonder what it's like to be on that team. I mean, particularly over the course of my life, I feel that the awareness of just how awful this name is has developed among non-Indigenous folks. And I wondered if you felt it on the team. Did you talk about it in the locker room? Was it a presence for you?
Yeah, it was. It was a presence, and I think it really started to hit the locker rooms more so in 2013. Was really when the pressure started to ramp up for the team to change the name. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the year that then President Obama had said that Daniel Snyder should change the name of the team. And players were talking about it, and obviously for minority players, it was definitely uncomfortable. But I think more so now players are starting to not only understand, just how bad the name itself is, but the history around the usage of the name and the history of the former team owner, the original team owner, George Preston Marshall. And he was an avowed segregationist. He was the last NFL owner to integrate in NFL teams with black players. And so when you start to realize that history, then it gives you a better understanding of how the past is palpably present today.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because we've been, and I'm going to talk to you for in a moment about Roger Goodell and some of the things happening in the NFL. But one of the things we've seen in the midst of this incredible social movement in the wake of George Floyd's killing and Breonna Taylor's killing is that there's been lots of reactions, and some of them feel very symbolic and almost sort of insultingly symbolic. And some of them feel symbolic and real and really important. And this feels like one of those. Do you think that's how it's going to land in the NFL?
Well, I think initially when you're looking at from a perspective of how big this movement has been, and so we look at it through the lens of how protests can create awareness and put pressure on teams or on entities to, be in fear of what the bottom lines are. And so when the corporations come out and they say, hey, it's time for a change, which Nike did, which FedEx did, and then other outlets started to not allow people to purchase merchandise, Washington football team merchandise from their website. So all these things started to happen, and you understand that persistence and justice go hand in hand. And so the more that these things are starting to happen, I think the bigger the pressure is building. And as you noted earlier, where the owner, the current team owner, Dan Snyder, said he would never, in all caps, change the name. And here we are today.